In 1938, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig was rummaging through the dusty basement of the National Museum of Iraq when he stumbled upon something that made absolutely no sense. It wasn't gold. It wasn't a sculpture. It was a small, nondescript clay jar, just 14 centimeters tall. Crude, unremarkable, ancient. But inside this jar was something bizarre. A copper cylinder. Inside that, an iron rod. The pieces fit together too precisely to be accidental, and traces of corrosion hinted at something else. Acid? Wait, acid? In a 2,000-year-old artifact? Koenig was stunned. What he held in his hands wasn't just pottery. It was, by all appearances, a functional electrical device. A battery, built during the Parthian Empire, centuries before the birth of Christ. A full 1,800 years before Benjamin Franklin flew a kite into a thunderstorm. It didn't take long for the headlines to follow. Ancient Mesopotamians had electricity. The first battery in history discovered in Iraq. Proof of lost technology? It was the perfect cocktail of science, archaeology, and conspiracy. And like all great mysteries, the deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. But let's rewind. What exactly is this so-called Baghdad Battery? The object is made of 3 parts: a ceramic pot, a copper tube, and an iron rod suspended in the center. The top of the copper tube is sealed with bitumen, a sticky, tar-like substance that kept the components in place and insulated them. The iron rod shows signs of corrosion that suggest it was in contact with an acidic liquid, possibly vinegar or lemon juice. When filled with acid and assembled, the device produces a small electric current, about 1 volt. Not enough to power a city, but enough to raise eyebrows. Was this intentional or a coincidence? To answer that, we have to explore both sides of the debate, the believers and the skeptics. On one side, you have experimental archaeologists and alternative historians who argue that this device is clear evidence of ancient electrochemical knowledge. They've replicated the battery. It works. So why wouldn't the ancients have used it? On the other side, conventional archaeologists argue that the battery theory is nothing more than modern fantasy projected onto ancient artifacts. They insist the jar may have been used for storage, religious rituals, or even scroll preservation. Anything but electricity. But then the question remains, why this exact configuration? Why the corrosion patterns? Why the acid? To find answers, we'll examine the theories, the reproductions, and the odd trail of similar artifacts found throughout the region. And we'll ask the one question no one dares to ask out loud: if the Baghdad Battery is real. If it was truly used for electricity, then what exactly was it powering? Because here's the twist. Batteries don't exist in isolation. They're tools, and tools imply purpose. Was it for electroplating, medical procedures, communication, worship, or something we haven't even imagined yet? And if ancient Mesopotamians had electricity, what else did they know? Let's dig into the clay and into the past. Since its discovery, the Baghdad Battery has become one of the most hotly debated objects in ancient technology. And while many dismiss it as pseudo-archaeological clickbait, others take it very seriously, including scientists who've tested working replicas. Let's begin with the experimental evidence. In the 1970s, Dr. Arne Eggebrecht, a German Egyptologist, famously recreated the device using lemon juice as the electrolyte. It produced just under 1 volt of electricity, enough to generate a mild shock. He even demonstrated that it could power a small electroplating process, a thin layer of silver coating onto another metal. This was a major point for the ancient tech camp. If you can build a battery with ancient materials, and it works, isn't that proof? The answer depends on what you believe proof really is. Skeptics, including many mainstream archaeologists, argue the following. Yes, the jar can function as a battery, but that doesn't mean it was meant to. Just because a coconut can float doesn't mean it was designed as a boat. They point out that no wires, switches, or connected devices were ever found alongside the Baghdad Battery. And that's a fair point. Electricity requires more than just a battery. It needs a system. Without evidence of use, the function remains speculative. Then there's the problem of scale. Only a handful of these devices have been discovered. If ancient people truly harnessed electricity, why wasn't it widespread? Why do we find no mention of it in their records? No temples lit by electric lamps. No diagrams. No cultural reverence for light from clay. But here's the counter-argument. What if these weren't household items? What if they were used in very specific rituals? Or reserved for an elite priest class? In that case, secrecy would make sense. And secrecy leaves few traces. Some proponents also point to another oddity, the craftsmanship. The copper tube and iron rod are incredibly well fitted. Too precise, some say, for random coincidence. Add to that the presence of bitumen as an insulator, and the presence of corrosion consistent with acid exposure, and you begin to see a pattern that's hard to ignore. Let's talk purpose. One of the leading theories is that the Baghdad Battery was used for electroplating, a technique that uses electric current to coat an object with a thin layer of metal. If true, this would be a mind-blowing revelation. Electroplating was thought to be discovered in the 19th century. A 2,000-year head start would rewrite parts of technological history. But there's a problem. We've never found definitively electroplated objects from that era. Some items show unusual coatings, but the evidence is inconclusive. Some researchers claim traces of silver plating inconsistent with known methods, but others say it could be the result of polishing or contamination. Another possibility, therapeutic use. Electricity has long been associated with medical treatment. In ancient Rome, electric fish were used to treat headaches and gout by delivering mild shocks. Could the Baghdad Battery have been a primitive medical device? Some argue yes. The low voltage output, comparable to modern tens units, fits the profile. A darker theory suggests torture or punishment, but there's no archaeological support for that claim. It remains speculation. There's also the spiritual angle. In many ancient cultures, mystical energy and divine power were closely linked. Could the battery have been used in rituals to simulate divine touch or animate religious statues? Could it have been seen as the literal breath of the gods, a force that causes things to twitch, spark, or shine? Then again, maybe we're overthinking it. Some archaeologists say the battery is simply a scroll holder, with the copper protecting the inner parchment from decay and the iron helping stabilize it. The acid residue? Just the result of environmental exposure over time. So who's right? The truth is, we don't know. That's what makes the Baghdad Battery so fascinating. It's not just what it might have been. It's the questions it forces us to ask. About our past. About our assumptions. About the blind spots in the timeline we think we understand. What's more dangerous than a lie? A half-truth, buried in clay, humming quietly beneath the dust. Today, the Baghdad Battery sits behind glass, silent, unpowered, and perhaps more misunderstood than ever. Some visitors pass it by, seeing only a jar. Others pause. They peer in, and they wonder, what if? That's the strange power of this artifact. It doesn't just challenge the history books. It haunts them. Since its rediscovery, the Baghdad Battery has inspired dozens of documentaries, fringe science books, and conspiracy-laced YouTube videos. It's been cited as evidence of ancient aliens, linked theories about lost civilizations, and even claimed as proof that time travelers tampered with our past. Most of that is noise, entertainment masquerading as insight. But underneath the noise lies a valid, unsettling question. Are we missing chapters in our technological history? Mainstream science says, probably not, but also maybe a little. Consider this. In 1900, A Greek sponge diver discovered a lump of bronze on the ocean floor near Antikythera. Inside that corroded mass, the remains of a mechanical computer, now known as the Antikythera mechanism. It shocked the world. No one believed ancient people had the precision or knowledge to build gear-driven analog computers. And yet, they did. That discovery redefined what we thought ancient minds were capable of. Could the Baghdad Battery be another such case? If so, what does that say about the way we construct history? Our understanding of the ancient world is based on surviving evidence, and most of it has been lost. Cities crumbled, scrolls burned, oral knowledge vanished with plagues and conquests. The absence of wires, manuals, or diagrams doesn't prove the battery wasn't used. It may simply mean we were lucky to find even one. There are also striking parallels in other cultures. In ancient Egypt, carvings in the Temple of Dendera have sparked debates over supposed light bulb imagery, elongated bulbs, connected to what looks like power sources, attended by priest-like figures. Skeptics call them stylized lotus flowers. Believers call them evidence of lost electric knowledge. In India, texts like the Azya Samhita describe devices that sound eerily like batteries and electrolysis. Again, skeptics dismiss these as mistranslations. But taken together, these outliers form a pattern, not of certainty, but of possibility. This brings us to the core of the issue, the danger of chronological arrogance. We like to think of progress as linear, from cavemen to code, but history doesn't move in straight lines. It loops, it burns, it forgets. Technological knowledge isn't just discovered, it must be preserved, and preservation is fragile. So let's ask the forbidden question. What if we're not the first high-tech civilization? No, not in the sci-fi sense of flying cars and iPhones. But what if, in pockets, at moments, the ancients discovered things we're only now rediscovering? Small voltages, medical shock therapy, metallurgical processes, sound engineering, complex astronomy. These aren't fantasies. They're possibilities scattered in clay, bronze, and stone. And if even one of those possibilities is true, then our image of the ancient world, dark, primitive, ignorant, is not just wrong, it's insulting. Here's the haunting truth. The Baghdad Battery might never give us a clear answer. It might remain a question mark in the shape of a jar. But that's not failure. That's the challenge. It's the reason we dig, the reason we question, the reason we keep returning to museums, caves, ruins, looking for that one thing that doesn't fit. And maybe, just maybe, it's already in our hands. A forgotten spark, a volt from the past, a whisper from a civilization that dared to bottle lightning and then vanished.